So the self parameter. Class methods have only one specific difference from ordinary functions. They must have an extra first name that has to be added to the beginning of the parameter list, but you do not give a value for this parameter when you call the method. Python will provide it. This particular variable refers to the object itself, and by convention it is given the name self. So basically when you create, let's get back to the example. So here when you create the self, it's basically it's a given for in all classes. This is to say that this is linked to puppy1, and then so the address, the Python will take care of that. Python, when you create a new instance of puppy, Python will take care of saying that, oh, this self is connected to puppy1. So that's why it's organized by Python. Now next we have the initialization method. So to create a new object with a class named name followed by set of parentheses, creator creates a new object of class creator. Just like we saw in the example, just by doing like create equal creator, where we create a new instance of that class. Super easy. It's not complicated at all. And just like function, classes, objects can have methods, except that we have an extra self variable. So in this case, we don't have a self here, but if we use a method, like when we define a new instance of a class, then we don't need to say to give self as a parameter. That's a hidden, only to create. I mean, only to when you write your class, then you write self. But then when you're initiating, you don't need to write that self parameter. So to create multiple objects is also simple. Just like we did in the example, you just create 1 equal creator, creator 2 equal creator, creator 3 equal creator. You can create as many creatures as you want, or as many puppies as you want. It's very simple, very easy to do, and just like you saw in the example. So now invoking a method. So when we create a method, just like in the example, after you initialize the class, the object, then you can use its methods. If you don't initialize, then you can't use its method, because the Python doesn't know what this class is about. So what is this? What object is this? What type of like the link of that class is. So it has to be initialized first in order to use the available methods. So just for example, here let's talk about constructors, and then I will talk about that. So a constructor is basically a special method that is automatically invoked right after a new object is created. So just like we saw before, in it I explained it. So it's basically it gives you every time we initiate a new object of that class, it goes automatically through that part. So we can just leave it blank, or we can change it to do something different. For example, in the examples we had before, in example 18, we left it blank here. There is no init method, but in the one before, we had an init method, and we changed it. For example, it initialized the name and the color. So it depends on what your class does. But if you want your initialization to do something, then you have to change your init method. But all of them automatically go through that process, the init process. Now, to create a constructor is basically just like I said. You define and then double underscore init double underscore self dot 2 points, just like a function, except the function name should be equal to this init with double underscore at the beginning and